My foot slammed down on the gas pedal, the car roaring as I sped down the street like a maniac. My mind was racing just as fast. The phone call still echoed in my head. The driver muttering something about Ariana being taken by men from the Genovese circle. I gripped the steering wheel harder, my knuckles turning white. I swerved around a corner, barely registering the blaring horns of other cars I cut off in my haste. I had one goal: to get to her, to fix this, and to make those bastards pay. When I reached the location the driver had given me, I slammed the brakes, the car skidding to a halt. Without thinking, I jumped out, my boots hitting the ground hard. The driver stood by the car, but before he could even open his mouth, I was on him. My fist connected with his face in a brutal punch, sending him stumbling back. "What did I tell you to do, you bastard?" I growled, my voice a low, dangerous rumble. He barely managed to catch himself before he fell, his hands shooting up defensively. But it was too late. I crouched down, ready to give him another blow that would send him straight to hell. My anger was blinding. But just as I reared back for another punch, Ariana's brother wedged himself between us, grabbing my arm. "What you're doing is useless, brother-in-law. You're hurting the wrong person. The people you should be beating are the men who took my sister. You have to look for them and bring her back. My sister never did anything wrong to anyone." His voice cracked. "Why did those men take her? Do they know my sister? Does she owe them something? Do you know them?" I stood, breathing heavily, my jaw clenched as I looked at Matthew. His eyes were wild with fear, and it was clear that he was on the edge of losing it. I swallowed hard, trying to tamp down the murderous rage boiling inside me. "I'll bring your sister back, safe and sound," I promised, my voice low and deadly calm. I averted my gaze from him, to the driver still groaning on the ground. "Get up," I snapped. The driver scrambled to his feet, shaking. "Take him back to the house, now!" Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked toward my car, intent on getting to Ariana. But before I could get in, I heard footsteps behind me. Matthew was rushing after me, his voice breaking through the tense air. "I'm not going back without my sister! I'm coming with you!" I stopped abruptly, my body stiffening with irritation. I turned, grabbed him by both shoulders, and stared into his frantic eyes. "Head back in the car and go home," I snapped, my voice ice cold. "Wait there." His expression faltered, his resolve wavering under the weight of my words. I didn't care. I was too focused, too consumed by the burning rage in my veins. Ariana was out there, and every second wasted could mean her life. Matthew's shoulders slumped in defeat as I let go of him and climbed into my car. Without a glance back, I drove off. I reached for my phone, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I dialed the number I knew belonged to the mastermind behind all this. Paul, the leader of the Genovese circle. It rang once, and before I could even brace myself, he answered, his tone deceptively calm. "Grayson," he said, as if he'd been expecting my call. "If you lay a hand on my wife, I promise you the hell you've never seen before." I growled, each word laced with a venomous threat. A chilling smirk came through the line. "I already did, Grayson. I already laid my hands on her. Sorry you spoke too late." I gritted my teeth so hard I could feel the sharp bite of my gums, a physical manifestation of the rage boiling within me. Every instinct screamed to tear him apart for even suggesting he'd touched her. I pulled over to the side of the road, the engine humming angrily beneath me, my heart racing as I fought to maintain control. "Where are you right now?" I demanded, the words bursting forth like a challenge. "Where I am is not important right now," he replied, the calmness in his voice infuriating. "What is important is what you're coming with. You know what I mean, right?" I closed my eyes briefly, taking a moment to breathe, to quell the seething rage threatening to erupt. I knew exactly what he meant. He wanted something in return. Paul's voice shifted, a dangerous edge creeping in. I know you're going to do anything to find me, but let me tell you this, Grayson. It's me you're going to find, but not your wife. So if you want her back, bring me my container with everything in it. If you do that, I will send you the address of your wife. Where the hell is she? I spat, the desperation clawing at my throat. Bring me what I want and you'll find out, he replied, his tone casual. My blood ran cold. You're playing a dangerous game, Paul. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I know exactly what you're capable of, he replied, amusement lacing his voice. But trust me, Grayson, you're not the only one with power here. You have 24 hours to decide. Tick-tock. The line went dead, and I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, the horn blaring in response. I sat there for a moment, the weight of Paul's ultimatum pressing heavily on my chest. My mind raced, trying to formulate a plan. What could I possibly do? Every option felt like a noose tightening around my throat. My phone vibrated in the passenger seat, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen, half expecting Paul to be calling back, but instead, it was Lord Andre. I hesitated before answering, knowing full well that our conversations rarely led to anything good. What is it? Don't even think of giving that container to Paul, Grayson, he said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. You know what it took us to get it. I raked my hand through my hair, frustration bubbling to the surface. Are you even hearing yourself? My wife? Don't act soft over a woman that's not even your wife, he interrupted, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. Let her die. It's good that your legal wife is back. My eyebrows furrowed in confusion and anger. What are you talking about? I brought your legal wife back since I knew you were too slow to act, he continued, his tone matter of fact. Focus on your work and let the girl die. A knot twisted in my stomach, disbelief mingling with rage. You brought her back? Who the hell are you to bring her back? I'm your father, Grayson, and I have every right to correct my son's mistakes, he said, his tone growing increasingly impatient. I've taken care of Lucian too. You've got bigger problems to deal with right now. The girl is no longer your concern. My mind raced. How could he be so callous? My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I processed what he was saying. I had to focus. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. You think I'm just going to forget about Ariana? She's my wife. You're a fool if you think that, he retorted. Your priorities should be crystal clear. Get your head in the game, or you'll end up losing everything. I tightened my grip on the phone, anger and confusion twisting inside me as Lord Andre's words rang in my ears. Your wife is back, he had said. He brought her back. Skylar. The name weighed heavily in my mind as I sat in the car, the engine still idling beneath me. The line had gone dead, leaving me in the tense silence of the car, but his voice still cut through the air like a jagged blade. He brought her back. Skylar. Skylar. I muttered to myself, my voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. The name sent a shockwave through my body. My father had found her, brought her back. But how? Did he know where she was this entire time? Did he follow me to Brazil? Did he know where Skylar and Lucian were all along and just pretended to be clueless? My jaw clenched as my thoughts raced. Then there was the kidnapping. How did he already know about Ariana's kidnapping? About what Paul and I just discussed? What the hell is going on? Where the hell does he get all this information? I stared down at the phone, suddenly filled with suspicion. A disturbing thought crept into my mind. Could he have done something to my phone? Installed a tracking device? Or worse, a spying chip? I frowned, flipping the phone over in my hand, examining it with a new sense of dread. It seemed perfectly fine, untouched, but if anyone could have tampered with it, they would have needed access. Intimate access. And the only person with access to my phones was... I froze, the name dying on my lips before it could escape. Tony. My right-hand man. My most trusted man. No. I whispered to myself, my throat dry. That's impossible. There's no way in hell Tony would betray me. He's been with me through everything, loyal to the bone. But as the thought lingered, doubt began to creep in. Could my father have gotten to him? Could Tony be the one feeding him information? I drove in silence, the weight of my thoughts suffocating me. The betrayal gnawed at the back of my mind, each second ticking by like a bomb ready to explode. Tony, my most trusted man. The thought alone sent my stomach into knots. But I couldn't jump to conclusions. Not yet. When I reached the phone technician's shop, I parked the car and grabbed all 3 phones that had been in the car with me. I strode inside, the bell over the door jingling as I entered. A young technician sat behind the counter, his head popping up from behind a laptop as he saw me walk in. "Check these," I said, tossing the phones onto the counter with a deliberate thud. My tone clipped. "See if there's anything on them, tracking devices, bugs, anything." The guy blinked, clearly caught off guard by the sudden demand, but quickly nodded. "Sure, I'll take a look." I leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, my jaw tight. As he got to work, my mind churned. "Tony, wherever you are," I whispered to myself through gritted teeth, anger clawing at my insides. "Pray that what I came here for isn't right. Because if it is, and you're the one behind this..." I paused, the heat of rage simmering just below the surface. "I swear to God, Tony, I'm going to kill you." Time dragged as the technician carefully dismantled each phone, poking and prodding at the circuits. I could barely stand still, the weight of the suspicion pressing down on my chest like a vice. After what felt like forever, he finally stood up, a grim look on his face. In his hand, he held something small, almost invisible to the naked eye. "There were tracking chips in all 3 phones," he said, his voice low and certain. "Someone's been keeping tabs on you." I stared at the tiny chips in his hand, my heart pounding in my ears. Tracking chips. A cold wave of fury washed over me, but my face remained impassive. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice calm, dangerously calm. He nodded, holding up the evidence for me to see. "Positive." Without another word, I pulled out a few $100 bills, slapped them on the counter, and turned on my heel. My hand clenched around the door handle as I stormed back to the car. There was no doubt now. Tony. He was the only one who had access to my phones, the only one who could have planted these. When I reached the company, I didn't waste time. I headed straight for my office, the tension building with every step. My pulse pounded in my ears as I grabbed the landline phone on my desk and dialed Tony's number. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Boss?" "Come to my office now." My voice was steady, devoid of emotion. There was a slight pause on the other end, a hesitation. "On my way." I hung up the phone, standing by the window, staring out at the city skyline as I waited. The door creaked open behind me a few minutes later, and I didn't bother turning around. I could feel Tony's presence as he stepped into the room, closing the door softly behind him. "Boss, you needed to..." "Sit down." I cut him off, my back still to him. He hesitated for a moment, then pulled out the chair in front of my desk and sat. I turned slowly, my eyes locking onto him with a cold intensity. "Tell me something, Tony. Why would there be tracking chips in all my phones?" My voice was quiet, almost calm, but every word was laced with deadly intent. Tony's eyes widened, his confusion genuine, or at least it seemed that way. "What? I don't know anything about—" "Don't lie to me!" I slammed my hand on the desk, the sharp sound echoing through the room. "You think I'm stupid?" His face paled, and he shook his head quickly. "Boss, I swear, I would never do something like that. I've been loyal to you for years." "Loyal?" I laughed bitterly. "Loyalty doesn't mean shit when you're selling me out behind my back." Tony shifted in his seat, panic flashing across his face. "I'm not selling you out, Grayson. I would never—" I stepped around the desk, closing the distance between us, my body towering over him. "Then explain the tracking devices. Explain how my father knows every damn move I make." Tony's eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape, but there was none. He was trapped, and he knew it. I swear I didn't plant any bugs. You have to believe me, Grayson." I leaned forward, eyes locked on him. Every muscle in my body coiled tight. My voice was calm, but underneath, a storm was brewing. "How long has it been, Tony? How long have you been working for my father? How long have you been feeding him information about my life?" I watched him closely. The slight flicker in his eyes told me everything before he even opened his mouth. He stood up slowly, his movements deliberate, almost casual, but I could see the weight of my words on his shoulders. "From the beginning," he said, his voice cold and unbothered. He didn't even blink as he added, "I was working for your father, not you, and it's not just me. He has people almost everywhere, people you'll never find." My jaw tightened. The years of loyalty, the conversations, the secrets I had shared with him, it all felt like a joke now. I forced the anger down, keeping my voice steady. "Why, Tony? I trusted you. I shared almost everything with you." He didn't hesitate, cutting me off like I hadn't just revealed the depth of his betrayal. "That was your problem," he spat, his lips curling into a mocking smile. "I never told you to trust me. I was just doing my job. Who in their right mind wants to work for someone who's being watched 24/7 by his father?" It meant one thing for certain. You had no control, no real say over your life. "Is it because you're a bastard son?" He said it like it was a fact, like it was supposed to hurt me. I stared at him, my hands resting calmly on my desk. A strange kind of calm settled over me. He thought he knew me, thought his words would break something inside me, but he was wrong. "Okay," I said quietly, my voice steady. "I've heard enough." Before he could react, I reached behind my back, fingers gripping the cold steel of the gun tucked against my spine. The moment slowed, like time giving me space to feel the weight of this decision, and then, without hesitation, I pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, loud and final. Tony's body jerked as the bullet tore through his skull, and then he crumpled, hitting the floor with a dull thud. I stared at him for a moment, not feeling anything but the silence that followed. It wasn't rage or satisfaction that filled me. It was just quiet. I reached for the phone and dialed a number, my mind already moving to the next task. As soon as the line connected, I spoke. "Come to my office." Within seconds, my men entered, their eyes quickly assessing the situation, but staying silent. They didn't need explanations. They knew what needed to be done. "Take him," I ordered, my voice colder than before. "And throw him in the sea. Make sure he disappears." They nodded, moving quickly to drag Tony's lifeless body from the office as they hauled him out. I turned toward the window, watching the city below. The world continued moving, oblivious to what had just happened in this room. I holstered the gun, the weight of it against my back, feeling like nothing at all. One problem was handled, but in the back of my mind, I knew this wasn't the end. My father had eyes everywhere, and Tony had just confirmed it. But I would deal with that later. Right now, there were other things I needed to take care of, and this was only the first step. I sat down at my desk, and without missing a beat, I opened my computer, fingers moving quickly across the keyboard as I pulled up the house's security system. My father had mentioned bringing Skylar back, as if it were some sick play to dangle before me. I scrolled through the camera feeds, moving from one room to another. The empty hallways, the living room, the kitchen. Nothing. She wasn't in any of them. My jaw clenched. Of course, my father wouldn't make this easy. Just as I was about to call the house to confirm, movement on one of the feeds caught my eye. I zoomed in. The hallway leading to Florence's room came into view, and there she was, coming through it, moving casually like she owns the house, her usual confidence and arrogance dripping from every step. My fists clenched at the sight of her, my knuckles whitening as I stared. Every part of me wanted to storm into that house right now and deal with her, but I forced myself to stay still, watching. Before I could think about my next move, I saw someone else come into view. Ariana's brother. He rushed toward Skylar, desperation clear in his body language, and pulled her into a tight hug. Skylar shoved him back, her face twisting in disgust, and then, without hesitation, she slapped him hard across the face. The sound of her palm connecting with his cheek echoed through my mind. And even though I didn't turn on the sound, I felt the impact. My grip on the desk tightened until I thought the wood would splinter beneath my hands. I understood why she hit him. He was probably a stranger to him, but watching it only made my fury grow hotter. I slammed the laptop shut, the sharp sound echoing in the room. My jaw clenched, muscles tense, and for a moment, all I could see was red. Skylar wasn't my priority, but the sight of her stirred something darker in me. This entire mess had gone on long enough. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to calm down. "Hung in there, Ariana," I muttered under my breath, pushing away from the desk. "I'm coming for you. It's time I take care of that bitch, too."